Hi, everyone. Great to have you here for this session, and thank you for joining us. I'm Alison Bird from Climate Salad, and it's really great to be with you today. Before we dive in, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathering today, which of course will be different for all of us. For me, it's the Midjabul people of the Bundjalung Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us today. If you haven't already, feel free to pop where you're tuning in from today in the chat. If you haven't got your company name, your business name or organisation name in your Zoom title, you could pop that in the chat as well. Really great to have you here. Today's session, From Australia to Singapore and Southeast Asia, Opportunities in the Green Economy, is with Adam Lyle and Derrick Chiang from Padang Co, where Adam is Executive Chairman and Derrick is CEO. They're both currently based in Singapore, but have that wonderful perspective of knowing both the Australian and Singaporean climate tech and startup space. And they're in that unique position to provide some information and explore with us today how Singapore offers opportunities to Australian climate tech companies. There'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions, but feel free to pop any in the chat as they come up, and we'll make sure that they get answered in our session today. Adam, Derrick, I will pass it over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Alison. Very happy to share our thoughts with you. So I'm Adam Lyle. I've been in Asia 20 plus years, originally from Sydney, also lived in Melbourne for many years, so let me call a dual citizen. My last gigs in Australia were working at Optus, and then I was CEO of Ticketek Australasia, the ticketing company, so kind of diverse background. And as I say, been in Asia for the last 20 plus years, the majority of that time in Singapore. The kind of quick relevance to where we are today. Back in 2006, like I'm sure many of you, I saw An Inconvenient Truth for the first time. And, you know, I really had my oh my God moment, and have been working on that ever since. And so that gotcha keeps getting me and keeps me focused on what we're doing today, which I'll get a little bit more into in the next couple of slides. Derrick.
Hi, my name is Derrick, the CEO of Padang Co, co-founded Padang Co with Adam 10 years ago when I returned to Singapore. I lived in a couple of other places before, Shanghai for 7 years, where I saw how if development and sustainability is decoupled, it could have quite devastating effects. And you know, having an Australian partner, and we're moving to Sydney in the last 20 years, you know, in and out of Sydney, realizing, you know, and feeling the sort of impacts from floods to bushfires, and you're having to worry about the safety of our friends, or whether they can get insurance or not. So you know, it's just really a theme that just kept coming up, and that's why when we founded Padang, we were really into sort of understanding how sustainability can be the foundation of everything that we do.
Okay, just on that. So Padang Co, as we said, we started some sort of 12 years ago, and we describe ourselves as an innovation catalyst. We match the largest organizations, be they government or private, to build match them with startups and scale-ups to build a net zero future by driving, you know, sustainable development that importantly creates business value, jobs, and new industries, while at the same time with a focus on the SDGs, which in this part of the world is very important to us, because at times the race to net zero can be too focused, and we believe can forget some of the aspects of the SDGs. We do focus in specific areas, as you can see on the slide, two main big buckets there, industries and cities. It's a big one, but that covers energy, built environment, and mobility. And on the right, as we worry about how we are going to feed the planet, and of course the enormous amount of emissions that comes from agriculture and food industry. So big focus there. And as Derrick said, sustainability is the foundation to everything that we do. Now, what we're going to talk about today, three sort of focus areas. One, what we see as the opportunities in Southeast Asia. And that's really important. We're going to dive into a lot of specifics, but at the same time, I think it's really important that we stand back and just see how everything is connected. And one of those great connection points is the Singapore-Australia Green Economy Agreement, and the wonderful things that there again, it's a wonderful foundation for your activities as you come and expand to Asia. And then we'll have a bit of a spotlight, particularly on Singapore, because that's where we are and that's what we know so well. Now, just before we get into some of the details, I think if you haven't all seen the Moore report, Australia's Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040, I'd certainly take a good look at that. That again is an amazing report that came out in September of last year and sets direction for Australia. Many of you, of course, would be familiar with the Gillard report many years ago, talking about the Asian century, which sadly was then buried by the incoming government after her. But this Moore report is particularly exciting because it's not just another report. We're seeing the federal government actually put some real money behind it, and we're seeing execution happening already. So these are really good times, and that sets a good backdrop as we now look into the Asian opportunities. Now, importantly, I think we can see that looking at the Climate Salad Industry Report, many of you have already got interest in Asia. You've got 19% already in Asia, but wanting to grow to 47% in the future. 36% of that actually being in Southeast Asia. And then also, it's a huge number that 89% of respondents want to be international by 2025. And I think this is really important to sort of see how we're going ahead on all of this. And of course, this plays into, and what we're wanting to do today is to play into Climate Salad's position of wanting to assist organizations to have a huge impact on reducing emissions globally. So just diving straight into some of the opportunities as we see it. First of all, on the left-hand side, you see the amount of emissions that need to be reduced. There's a 32% reduction on business as usual by 2030, 2.4 gigatons, a huge amount. And but at the same time, that opens up an enormous opportunity. And on the right-hand side, you see the 5 buckets of opportunity that in the recent report produced by Bain, Gen Zero, Temasek, and Stan Chart, there's a $300 billion revenue pool, which is kind of the size of the prize, if certain actions are taken. Now, the reality is, to get to that revenue pool, there's an investment required of, and you'll see all these numbers in different reports, it's anywhere between 1.5 and $2 trillion, an enormous amount of money. So far, since 21, across the region, we've spent somewhere of the order of 50 billion. So there's a long way short of the investment required, but the size of the prize is quite enormous, as you can see, equating to about 5% of SEA's GDP by 2030. Big numbers all around. Now, the good thing here is that big prize and lots of the companies in Southeast Asia are making commitments. Now, as we all know, if we want to be cynical, there are commitments, but what's actually happening? They've made the commitments, but they are admitting they're struggling. So again, there's great opportunities to support these organizations, whether you're supplying particular products, hardware, or services, consulting services, or a full range of different services to support these companies achieve what they're seeking to do and actually step up to those commitments, because Southeast Asia is way behind on its commitments at the moment. And that's not atypical. We're seeing that globally in many situations. A lot to do, lots of opportunities. And this particular report that I just mentioned, while there's $300 billion by 2030. They've reduced it down to help us focus a little bit more, and they've highlighted 13 investable ideas, profit pools, that will contribute 50% of that, $150 billion worth of revenue value across these 4 particular segments that you can see: nature and ag, power, transport, and buildings. And then with each of those, they then drill down further. So there's an enormous amount of information in these reports that you can look at offline here. We'll give you all the references as you start to see how do you lean into some of these opportunities. To assist that, Derrick's going to take us through some of those particular areas and go into a little bit more detail and highlight what's happening.
So I'm going to present 5 sectors, and so the names of these sectors come from the Climate Salad report. So it doesn't match with the Bain report, but I use the Climate Salad report as the guiding principle here, and the value that you see at the top of the page does come from the Bain Southeast Asia report. So, as noted in the Bain report itself and other literature, there's no clear improvement in soil health, which highlights the importance of alternative farming methods, and the specific ideas or solutions that they think should happen in this area as such: regenerative agriculture practice, alternate wetting and drying for rice cultivation, and precision agriculture practice. And they also identify a number of potential accelerators, which are, I think, relevant to this group here. Things like, forming partnerships to drive more broad-based change, that they could involve providing training, technical assistance to upskill farmers, improve their technical know-how, and driving sort of behavioral change, and introducing smallholder financing or solutions. Then in itself actually brings a lot of opportunities for climate tech companies. There are also, there's a lot of this being done by companies big and small in terms of unlocking finance. We are seeing some companies commissioning projects to unlock carbon credits or to generate and also record carbon credits there as well. And also there are standards and being established to actually help with the consistency in terms of the adoption when the solutions scale. On the right side of the page, you see a couple of examples. So each one of these sectors will share some examples. These are actually examples that us at Padang we have come across. So it's basically saying these are opportunities, these are the big opportunities that are being identified. These are actually specific things that companies are looking at this year. Cargill, for example, was looking at optimization of fertilizer use, and Michelin, as you all know, buys a lot of rubber, and it is basically saying how can they enable the smallholders that actually supply them with rubber be certified and audited so that they can actually participate in the carbon credit platform. Next is biosphere, which in the Bain report it was called nature. This conservation of forests as well as wetlands. Almost all countries in Southeast Asia actually currently are seeing a steady reduction in deforestation, because I think the effectiveness of the policies are coming through now. There are various needs for nature-based solutions, tech startups to improve the understanding and the benefits of these solutions, like agroforestry and land restoration as well. The example of a program that we hope to support in the last year was the Biodiversity Accelerator Plus by Silver Strand, which is actually a family office, and it's basically investing in regenerative agriculture and nature-based solutions. Next is renewables. This is actually quite a large, size of the price. It's very large, 90 billion out of the 300 billion. So it's quite a big chunk here. And here we're looking at a range, but basically I pulled out a few things that are more relevant to this group here, mainly looking at utility scale generation of renewables. So most countries in Southeast Asia have been quite slow to increase the share of renewable energy. So solar and wind generation is still really low. I think it's less than 4%. And only Vietnam actually has shown some sort of increase because they have high feed-in tariffs and also because of their climatic conditions where they got abundant sunlight and also strong winds along their very, very, very long coasts. However, just yesterday I heard from someone that they are reducing greatly the feed-in tariff that could have a big impact. So I haven't had the time to investigate that. So things can change, but well, the good news is that countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, they all have an energy transition roadmap, and in that roadmap, they identify renewables as not just a good to have, but a must-have. So we're probably going to be seeing some change there, some privatization of renewables. A couple of examples that we've come across. We were actually responsible for scouting for solutions in there as part of OCBC, which is one of the leading Singapore banks, Sustainability Innovation Challenge with Total Energies, looking at distributed generation systems across Asia, and in the Enterprise Singapore Sustainability Open Innovation Challenge, looking at with Avario, which is a chemicals company, just looking at floating PVs. I'll get into the whole situation in Singapore where we have various limitations in deploying PVs in Singapore, and so floating PVs is something that Singapore is specifically looking at. Next is mobility. Internal combustion engines vehicles, I think about 10% of emissions in Singapore. So there's obvious electrification opportunities here, and especially 2- and 3-wheelers. So we sometimes think of electrification as the Teslas, but in Southeast Asia, it's the 2- and 3-wheelers that presents the biggest opportunities. But obviously, we're still also looking at electrification of 4-wheelers, and that's really catalyzed, especially in Singapore and Thailand in the last 24 months, I would say, with the influx of cheaper Chinese EVs, and I think in Singapore, BYD was the biggest selling car last year. And finally, built environment. Actually, there are two different groups that the Southeast Asia report identified: data centers and more general commercial and industrial buildings. Data centers itself is already 3% of Southeast Asia emissions, and buildings about a quarter. So obviously building standards are improving and also increasing in terms of what they are demanding buildings actually comply with. So there's standards to increase the reliability, availability, and energy optimization as well. So there's plenty of opportunities in that particular area. We've been very fortunate to run the built environment program in Singapore, and we're really seeing a lot of activity around energy efficiency in buildings. And later on, I'll get into the Singapore Green Plan, which has very specific goals for Singapore. So just one more thing, which we really liked this slide from the Southeast Asia report about how AI can really drive and accelerate deployment in very specific areas there. I won't read this, but sometimes we get AI companies coming to us and just asking, like, where do you think the opportunities could be? And we thought this chart presents, interesting ways that AI or generative AI can make a difference in accelerating the deployment, not just to execute it.
Yeah, and I think the point to make here is, before we leave this slide, yes, it says AI, but as we know, there's different levels, and a lot of this is about data analytics as is before it actually is getting to real machine learning and then to AI. And if you look at these particular categories, and again, with our understanding of some of the climate tech opportunities in Australia, the companies looking to expand, some of the things we've just outlined are the very big projects, the big infrastructure investment that has to happen, whereas many of these opportunities, if you will, are the supporting. And so I think it's really important not to be intimidated. We're not going to be spending hundreds of millions into a particular project, but if you like, it's the picks and shovels that are going to support the transition. And I think so many of these services here play into that. And along the lines of that is getting into the Green Economy Agreement. Now, this is pretty significant. The agreement, when it was signed back in October of 22, it was the first Green Economy Agreement in the world, which is kind of typical of the relationship between Singapore and Australia, really trying to push the envelope. It's exciting because we've got the Moore report on one level talking about opportunities, the things that you've just heard from us. This is an engagement process, which is really important. And if you look at the third side of this slide, some of the highlights, it's really focusing on how we can better match people. It does focus on specific areas, whether it's clean energy, decarbonisation, and critically, green and transition finance, which when we're trying to finance $1.5 trillion worth of infrastructure in the years ahead, green and transition finance is certainly the big unlock of all of that. And it's complicated, let's face it, we're not going to solve that one on this call, but that's one of the big issues. The particular agreement, I encourage you to take a look at it. There are 16 annexes, which are in readable English, and there's real commitments on both sides of the house. The governments meet, the prime ministers of Australia and Singapore meet once a year in one another's countries, and they review these activities. And the Green Economy Agreement and what's been done is reviewed each year. So it's really terrific that it exists, and it has put down steps that need to be taken, commitments on behalf of DFAT, Austrade, and on this side of the house, Ministry of Trade and Investment and Enterprise Singapore, particular and specific programs that they need to run. Thanks for putting in that link, Alison, that's great. So then just going to a couple of things that have already happened. So sort of the good news here is with the innovation activities. The one on the left, the Go Green Co-Innovation Program. Some of you on the call perhaps put in submissions on that, I'm not sure. The first round closed late last year, and we've already seen 4 companies from Australia announced, just two companies that have been announced. Jet Zero Australia, you may be familiar with. It has a project on sustainable aviation fuel, partnering with a Singapore company. Another company, Giveable, involved in environmental monitoring, has also been awarded a grant. And the good news is not all the money was spent, not that we really believed it would all be spent in one go. And there is another call coming up mid-year. Watch out for it. And give yourselves plenty of time to put in. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of paperwork to go through, but they are looking at simplifying it based on the feedback from many folks, including ourselves, and make it simple for people to get together. The key part of this is you need to have a Singapore partner. If you're having trouble locating potential Singapore partners, let Alison know, let us know, and we're more than happy to see how we can help you find appropriate people to assist in your application. The one on the right-hand side is one that we've actually just launched last month with the support of Enterprise Singapore. It's the Australian Green Economy Innovation Challenge. I think that the title gives you a hint of what it's all about. And as you can see on the slide, we've sourced 4 Australian-based organisations, BlueScope, Sunrise, Comfort Delgro and ANC Delivers, to put out challenge statements, and we're in the process at the moment searching and scouting globally for solution providers to submit solutions to the challenge statement owners, and then they will be matched up, and then they will come to Australia and do a pilot. So pretty exciting stuff, the first one of its kind. So pleased to be part of that. And then I think anyone that was anywhere in Australia probably would have been aware of the ASEAN Special Summit back in March, which was a big deal for Australia to host that. 50 years celebrating our relationship, which you would know is a very strong one on many, many levels, from defence, education, enormous number of things that we've done with ASEAN, but particularly with Singapore. And as the title says there, next year in 2025, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which was signed back in 2015. And again, this is a really important agreement between the countries, because again, each year they meet to discuss what's been done. 100 initiatives have been worked on over the last 9 years, and then next year they're opening up a kind of a new era, which will be focusing a lot on all things green economy. We'll see things around aviation, renewables, and both prime ministers are talking about wanting to be ambitious. Will be a new Singaporean prime minister by then, but they're looking to a new era of collaboration. I think that's particularly exciting. With certainly some of the announcements we've seen coming from the Australian government just in recent weeks, and of course in the May budget, more Future Made in Australia. There's a lot happening, and there's a lot of that can be tied into the Green Economy Agreement and the opportunities that we have discussed so far.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, not a lot of media attention in Australia for that particular summit, because it happened at the same time as Taylor Swift in Melbourne that week. So anyway, moving on, spotlight into Singapore, my hometown. Singapore has has over many years, since the founding of Singapore in 1965, been a garden city. So it's always actually put the city within a nature, and as it's trying to be as green as it can. But I think there's a whole lot of different initiatives, activities. Different departments are doing different things and announcing different types of targets as well for themselves. And the SG Green Plan was actually launched a few years ago, when the ministry itself, the Environment Ministry, renamed itself as Sustainability and Environment, putting sustainability first and really starting to look at the green economy as well. So I picked out a few of these pillars from the Green Plan. The other pillars were like city and nature, and also sustainability, sustainable living. So whilst Singapore is sort of halfway through reaching our goals for, say, the solar energy deployment, for example. I mean, we all know that actually we have a lot more to go in terms of reaching any of these plans. The last column, for example, 30 by 30, it's basically producing 30 of our nutritional needs locally. And that's, we are still a very long way from there. But the good news is that with buildings, for example, we're almost there. In fact, we're doing really well, tracking really well. But there's just a lot more money in this particular sector. As you probably know, Singapore is a real estate town. There's a lot of money in buildings, and certainly energy efficiency is something that is being looked at. And importantly, just to present the overall umbrella, it's a green economy. I'll get into a few slides after this. As Singapore as a leading center for green finance, that's a stated national strategy now, as a carbon services hub, as also an innovation center. So one of the best things about Singapore is it's a very good test bed for new innovative solutions before it's exported to the rest of the region. And lastly, Jurong Island as a sustainable energy and chemicals park, because as you probably know, Singapore is I think the second biggest oil refinery in the world, and Jurong Island is chock full of energy and chemicals companies. So developing innovative sustainable solutions around sustainability in Singapore, I think it's really important in terms of helping all these companies decarbonize. So just get on to a few big themes here. As I mentioned, green financing. It's something that the Monetary Authority of Singapore has been actively developing. It's a regulatory framework to encourage the growth of green finance. And there's a green finance action plan as well to basically strengthen the whole financial sector, resilience to environmental risks, develop green financial solutions, and also leverage the innovation technologies. And there are a number of financial incentives that are being offered, and including grants and schemes and various things to banks, for example, to finance green projects. And just last week, there's a big announcement of actually upskilling the banking industry, specifically the employees of banks, so that they actually understand and be equipped with the necessary skills and knowledge to evaluate and to support sustainable projects. So one of the projects that we've been involved in last couple of years was this, for OCBC, which is one of the leading banks here, their Sustainability Innovation Challenge. It's their way of actually getting involved in particular sectors. So the first year was SATS, which is the ground handler and also the food catering business. So we're looking at circular economy and waste to energy solutions. Last year, we were working with Total Energies and OCBC, looking at EVs, EV batteries, second life, and also and distributed energy systems in the region as well. So more and more of these activities are happening. By the way, Adam and I has actually said the word challenge a number of times. We recognize this is something that not a lot of innovation challenges happen in Australia, but it's actually one of those key ways in Singapore and in the region to open up corporate challenge statements, so that startups or scale-ups can have a look into what the corporate's looking for and willing to test and willing to buy. And it's just one way that a lot of startups find opportunities and get into the door. The next big thing that's really strongly emerging, especially in the last month alone, was sustainable aviation and fuels, and also maritime fuels as well. This has actually been going on for the last couple of years. Singapore Airlines, the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore, as well as Gen Zero, the domestic arm, completed a 20-month pilot project that tested the potential of sustainable aviation fuel credits. So this has been going on for the last couple of years, but it really kicked up one notch last month when Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore announced a mandate. Not very high percentages, but it was one of the first governments to really mandate the use of SAF. And I suppose we can because in Singapore we are aviation hub, we are also a maritime hub. There's just more uptake in Singapore, which then attracts people like Neste, for example, to build the world's largest production facility of SAF. Just going back to the Southeast Asia report as well, one of the top ideas they did identified was just using and converting the agricultural waste streams from all over South Asia, because there's the sort of abundance of that to become a second generation biofuel, so that you can use SAF as well as low carbon transition fuels in maritime.
And that's key, of course, because both sustainable aviation fuel and maritime fuel and the green corridor are part of the Singapore Australia Green Economy Agreement. So we're seeing other ways that the activation can occur. So if you're playing in that field, as you may know, the SAF industry is very nascent in Australia, but there's a lot of people looking at the huge opportunity there. So that's something that will be happening in Australia as well as happening here in Southeast Asia and Singapore.
Just move on. So just we thought we might actually include this because you know, but we're thinking like besides corporates, who else is buying a solution? So what's just happened last month was that the enterprise financing scheme was expanded. This scheme was actually initially for solution providers in Singapore to develop solutions to enable corporates as well as SMEs, and especially SMEs to you know to reduce the waste and improve their resource use and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in those areas, green energy, circular economy, green infrastructure, and clean transportation. So it was meant for to fund the development of solutions, but last month it's now expanded to include solution adopters, so basically buyers. So especially as SMEs and large SMEs, is to help them buy solutions, and those solutions can be from Singapore or from elsewhere. So suddenly the market for solutions have sort of expanded. So this is something that we'll be looking quite closely.
And an important thing about that, of course, is that you can be selling your solutions into different opportunities, but those companies can source this great finance, which is terrific. Yeah.
So a few slides on funding, and then we'll end this, conscious of time. So you know, you hear a lot of about Singapore versus Indonesia in terms of the size, but you know, Singapore is still by far the largest market for where funding is available. You can see that. I highlighted the red box around urban solutions and sustainability. Basically, that's the box where energy, waste management, water consumption, air quality, and environment solutions actually fall. You can see that that's actually one area that Indonesia has more than Singapore. This data comes from the Dewsbury Asia and Enterprise Singapore's Singapore funding venture funding landscape report. So they do the one every year. 24 is not released yet, but this is from last year. But it'll be interesting to see if any of these increases rather than drops, because as you all know, you know, we're in the middle of the funding winter at the moment. And speaking of that, there has been a bit of a I actually won't say a bit of a drop. There was a huge drop from 22 to 23. Hopefully it doesn't drop any further, but sensing is that it's about the same. And the report itself actually made the observation. The headline observation was that there's a shift to early stage investments, but frankly, just looking at the data, it doesn't quite suggest that. So I don't think it's that there.
And just as some kind of comparatives, if you think about the Cut-Through Ventures 2023 report across all sectors in Oz, it was looking at about 3.5 billion. So if you look at the numbers here, over 6 billion, it just gives you a sense of the difference, the size of funding in Southeast Asia compared to Australia. And then trying to actually get comparables around actual investment in climate tech. It's not just as easy at the moment, but I know the Climate Salad folks did a great job reporting for 22, where it was around about 500 million, which sort of looks somewhat similar to some of the numbers that Derrick showed on the earlier slide. But it's a bit hard to do the comparable, so we're still unpacking some of that data. But there has, of course, been this in 23 big fall off here in the same way as in Australia. Yeah, I mean, but let me just see there. What is interesting here is that all these great opportunities, there's money available, but the Singaporean investors are still pretty tough. They're looking at returns as the primary motivator compared with, say, 60% globally. But at the same time, the government here also is looking at a whole range of different philanthropic activities to provide different levels of finance, early finance, blended finance, etc., which I think is particularly interesting to see that coming through. A little bit more on that on the next slide. Here, the taxonomy that was released in December is pretty interesting because it was the first in the world to comprehensively define transition activities across 8 sectors. And what I particularly liked about that is, I mean, it's a very detailed report. I think it's 130 pages, but it breaks down each of these sectors into red, green, amber. Or should go green, amber, red. The green being absolutely that's good for transition finance, and the amber not so, and the red do know is don't want to touch those. But what I think is particularly interesting about that report is it breaks down all these sectors in quite a lot of detail to give you, again, a thinking about how finance is thinking at all these sectors and how they can be financed. And just kicking along to the next slide, again, sort of a bit on the funding side. Big pots of money. Singapore, again, as you know, if you said what is their overall strategy in many places, it's about being a hub. Everything's a hub, whether it's carbon credits want to be a hub, sustainability being a hub, and family offices wanting to be a hub, family offices. It was around 700 in 2021. It's now over 1,100 family offices. And to qualify for a family office and get the deductions, you're investing significant amounts of money. And now that that money is here, that money also needs to be going places. And so that's why also that there is a keen push on developing lots of different philanthropic opportunities and services to help those family offices effectively invest that money. So there are so many things happening at different levels. And that's why I said in opening remarks, we've got to think of kind of the systems approach. Yes, there's lots to be done. There's lots of emissions to be abated, but then we need to look at how we're going to do this and what all the different supporting levels are. Oh, am I talking?
Yeah. So So that you, unfortunately, anyway, there are 2 trade missions from Singapore, from Victoria as well as New South Wales coming to Singapore. Unfortunately, both cohorts are now closed, but I just wanted to show you that there are various opportunities. I'm sure that Climate Salad will be organizing some trade missions to this part of the world as well. And there will be various types of support for Australian startups, and and these also hit us up if you like some advice, anything that you think that we can help you with. So that's all for our presentation. You can see there's a whole bunch of links there. Basically, these are the sources that we pulled. Obviously, there's a lot more reports, but we just didn't want to throw too much information at you, and want to leave a little bit of time for discussion. If there's any questions that we can answer.
Fantastic. Thanks, Derrick and Adam. That was a really informative overview and covering the market, sectors and funding. I had a whole list of questions ready to ask, but you've managed to cover just about all of them. And I'm really glad, Derrick, that you mentioned about Taylor Swift being in the news, because I was thinking, I don't think I remember hearing that much about the summit. So I'm glad you made that connection. I do have one question though, as people kind of put their questions in the chat, or put up your virtual hand or the real one, give me a wave. I'm curious, for companies entering the Singapore market from overseas, what are some common pitfalls that they might encounter, and what are some of the key considerations they should address to really set up for success?
Well, pitfall is possibly being, let's say, overambitious without having done the hard yards before. And again, and people are going, well, duh. But, I have to be honest, that many times people do arrive here and say, hey, we're in town for a couple of days. We want to do X. What might we do? Well, it's just not good enough planning. So that's on that level. And with these particular trade missions and the programs, state governments and federal doing through Austrade, there's such great opportunity to get a lot of information and understand, because obviously there are great companies in Australia and there are great companies in Singapore in the region. So, are there particular gaps? Having a real focus on why your particular product or service is going to meet a need that's not currently being met, and more particularly or equally, how can we add on to the already good stuff? It's using the services that exist. So the particular state organisations, the federal, the Australian Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore. I was on the board and a past president. It's a great organisation to tap into. So use all the resources you can before you try to get here and say, okay, here I am. And that's certainly something. But yeah, doing the analysis.
Yeah, sometimes we struggle with this, right? Whether we scare people too much by saying it is a very complex thing. Singapore and Indonesia are completely different, right? I mean, it's a cliche to say that, but it really is. But sometimes when people come to us and say, all of Southeast Asia, I want, because you see the headlines, right? It's like, big populations but it is very diverse. We don't want to scare everybody, but it really is. But the great thing about startups is do one thing and one thing really well. If we're identifying the thing that you can do very well in a particular country, in a particular place, that would be great. Because similarly, it's similar to the situation in Australia where, corporates will ask, have you executed this in Australia? If the answer is no, then maybe next year. It's the same thing in Southeast Asia. If you are able to execute something in Southeast Asia and then go on to scale that would be good. Which is why I brought up the point about Singapore being the launchpad to the region. That Singapore is set up to do so. And in most parts of Southeast Asia, carrying the Singapore badge, the stamp of approval, that you've done executed a solution here. It's basically gets you, it helps open doors a little bit. Plus the fact that we have 7,000 to 8,000 regional headquarters in Singapore. So most of our companies here in Singapore are regional businesses. They are looking at the rest of the region. Frankly, a lot of the business work that we do, it's not even for Singapore, because Singapore is too small a market for them to test. But sometimes they test it here. Especially for built environment, they test all these solutions here before it goes to Indonesia, before it goes to Thailand, or Vietnam, and even to China. So it's all connected in that way.
Yeah, and a big part of what needs to be done to reduce, the 2.4 gigatons is going to be nature-based solutions. Well, there's only so much nature here in Singapore. Most of those nature-based solutions are going to be applied across Southeast Asia. But again, it's easy to set up here, and I apologize if we sound like we're doing sort of Singapore tourism here, but it is a great place to set up. It's easy. There are services like Sleek and all the rest of it. Setting up a company, is very straightforward. 70% of the money raised, venture capital money raised in Southeast Asia, is for Indonesia and Singapore companies. The legal system here is good. People, but if you're building a big business, that business is really going to be built in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, because there's only so much business that can be done here. But it very much depends on what you are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like really doing, and that makes sense, doing your research before you go. Just 101. There's a question here from Pat there, and I know that you've noted it, Adam, in the chat there. But just coming off the back of that, about really finding the niches in Singapore, and I guess in the region more broadly. Are you seeing anything in particular around that kind of food waste at all? Have you got any kind of insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually run a number of food waste challenges over the years for SATs, for Rabobank. So it's a real problem. Singapore's food waste is shocking, as is Australia. There's actually a food waste challenge being run in Australia at the moment. So people should look out for that. But yeah, it just keeps getting worse. So people are open to solutions, and Pat's right. Prevention is better than cure. What can we do to have much better joined up thinking so we avoid that? Circular economy is something that is a great focus in Australia, and certainly looking at the Climate Salad reports, a lot of work done on that. Circular economy is being talked about in the region and in Singapore, but I think that's a really interesting kind of comparative advantage for Australian tech at this point, because there's more going on in my observation in Australia in circular economy. But anything that can reduce food waste, different approaches, is to lots of opportunities here. We're seeing different people working with hotel groups and a whole range of activities.
So just to add to that, right? It feels like the Australia food waste problem could be at the farm gate, right? With huge amounts being not even being taken by the supermarkets, because we've got these, we want curved bananas, for example. So, but I think that there are other opportunities in terms of transportation, traceability, cold chain. Again, because Singapore is a transportation hub, it's a shipping hub, and so those sort of solutions are there. Or if we go down to the level of particular parts of Indonesia, for example, it's about land transport, right? Timely arrival of trucks to carry certain produce, and maintaining cold chains as well. So there's all these interesting opportunities and to be discovered.
Olivia, I see your question about manufacturing strengths or weaknesses. Yes, Singapore's manufacturing, it still does a lot of manufacturing, but advanced manufacturing is obviously an area they're wanting to focus on. A lot of the manufacturing that got us to here has moved offshore nearby. It's in places like Indonesia or Malaysia, even as close as Batam, which is a 40-minute ferry ride away. So there is focus. For instance, I'm actually just looking for some basic tin bashing to be done for a company that's wanting to come here from the UK, and kind of finding some of those that you might be able to find in Sydney or Melbourne is just not always as easy to find those. But it really does depend, Olivia, on the specifics of the manufacturing. But it's more high-end, high-value add manufacturing that you would see here. And yes, you are right that people may set up the HQ here, particularly if we're talking about fundraising. It's easier to fundraise with a Singapore incorporated company than, say, a Vietnamese incorporated company, just for a whole bunch of reasons. But obviously, if you're running a business in Vietnam, you still have to have business registration to operate the activity in Vietnam or in Indonesia. Traditionally, setting up companies, incorporating companies, both in Indonesia and Vietnam, has been difficult because the paperwork and getting bank accounts and all the rest of it has been more problematic. There are special economic zones in these countries that do make that easier, but there is quite a lot to sort of be worked through on. Okay, we can have a headquarters here of fundraising if you seek to raise funds in Asia. This is a good place to employ people. And then you are operating now. You might be operating as principal in those countries, or of course you can have a contracting relationship with, say, a Vietnamese manufacturer. You know, you're setting up the right SOPs, and perhaps you're working with them, but you don't necessarily have to incorporate your company to do the manufacturing in Vietnam. You're specifying or flying in and ensuring that the product is being made to your specifications. But that in itself is quite a sort of an exercise to go through, and depends on the particular item you're manufacturing.
Just to share my observation, the built environment program that we run in Singapore for Building Construction Authority as well as Enterprise Singapore, all the hardware startups, all the startups that we work with, they call themselves robotic startups, or AIs and AI drones and things like that. All of them use hardware that's built in China or India. Singapore just does not have that. Singapore doesn't even try to build any of this hardware. It's just so much easier to procure, and then slap a software layer or the data analytics layer on top of it. So that's something that Singapore has been doing for the last 5 years, especially.
And Pat, your question about working through a Singaporean partner, the short answer is yes. Again, it depends. Are you looking at an SME, or is it a startup, or you're trying to work through an existing MNC as a distribution partner, or an SME can be a distribution partner? It all very much depends on what is it that you're wanting to do. But what you will find, people here are incredibly open. At times, people come here and say, I can't believe how helpful people are. And I had many Australian companies and get referred to various people. Very easy. I can't help you, but here's somebody who can. It's a very collaborative environment, which might surprise people at times, but after 18 years, I can only say that, it continues to surprise me how helpful people are. But, you've got to put your best foot forward and sort of come prepared. By all means, you've got our contacts. But I'm just seeing the time, Alison.
Yeah, I think that probably just about wraps this up today. Adam and Derrick, thank you so much for giving us that really in-depth overview. I think it gives people a really fantastic starting point for collecting that information, doing their research to think about whether they're looking to expand there. And I can see that Glenn is heading to Singapore as part of that trade mission. So some opportunities to connect in the future as well. Thanks everybody for jumping in today. We really appreciate it. And yes, as Adam mentioned, we are hoping in the future at some point to get over on a trade mission to Singapore or Southeast Asia. If that's something that you're interested in, do let us know. That helps us to do with our planning. Thanks everybody for jumping in today, and a big thanks again to Adam and Derrick from Padang Co. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Climate Salad, for the opportunity.